You can call me Jack Turner. It's not my real name, but it's the one I'll use to tell you how a man like me, once proud, once certain, once drowning in his own corruption, came face to face with the day Allah took everything from him. Before we begin, I need to say this clearly. This story is inspired by true events. It's told with deep respect for all faiths, and meant only to share one man's journey toward finding peace in Islam. From which country are you watching this video? Subscribe to this channel if you love Islam. I spent most of my life in a small American town where the roads were long, the summers were scorching, and the police badge on my chest was supposed to mean something noble. But to me back then, it meant something else, something profitable. The heat would rise from the asphalt like smoke, the dust sticking to every part of my uniform, and I would stand there with the ease of a man who knew the road was his hunting ground. Drivers feared the ticket. I knew how to use that fear. The first time I accepted a bribe, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. I still remember the guy, maybe mid-20 seconds, nervous, sweating, fumbling for words after running a red light. He looked terrified, and instead of reassuring him or doing my job honestly, I leaned against his window with a kind of practiced calm I didn't deserve. "We can solve this here," I told him, lowering my voice like I was doing him a favor. He understood. They always did. And when he slipped a few bills into my hand, they felt warm and easy and addictive. It didn't happen overnight. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to be corrupt. It was slow. A little here, a little there. One excuse at a time. Everyone does it. The system is broken. I'm underpaid. It's not like I'm hurting anyone. That's how the devil works, through whispers that sound like logic. And I let those whispers guide me deeper into the rot. By the time all of this happened, corruption wasn't a temptation anymore. It was routine. I knew the intersections that made the most money. I knew the drivers who would pay without arguing. I knew how to phrase things so it seemed like I was the one saving them. "I'm helping you," I'd say, but I wasn't helping anyone, least of all myself. That morning, the sun was already burning the horizon when I left home. My wife had packed me breakfast, simple food, lovingly made. She smiled as she handed it to me. "Be safe out there, Jack. May God protect you." I kissed her briefly, but guilt flickered in my chest. She thought she was married to an upright officer, a man respected by his community. She didn't know about the extra cash hidden inside my sock drawer. She didn't know what the word overtime really meant. On my way to the station, I passed a small mosque. The soft recitation of Quran floated into the morning air, and for one brief moment, just a breath, a heartbeat, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A quiet tug inside my chest, like a forgotten truth knocking on a door I kept locked. I ignored it. I turned my radio up and kept riding. My shift that day was at an intersection I practically owned. It was one of those places people rushed through because they were late for work or in a hurry to get home. The sun climbed high, the metal of my badge grew hot against my chest, and the smell of engine fumes mixed with fried food from the street stalls. I started my work, a speeding driver here, a distracted mother there. A man without a seatbelt, a truck overloaded past legal limits. Each stop was a transaction. Each transaction fed the part of me that had forgotten what integrity felt like. One of the drivers I stopped was an older man with gray hair and exhausted eyes. He looked like life had worn him down for decades. When I threatened him with the official fine, he begged. Literally begged. "Please, sir, my salary is small." His voice cracked, but my heart didn't. I told him to pay me directly. He did. And he drove off with a face full of humiliation while I stood there pretending I'd done something normal. But the moment that stuck with me that day was when I stopped a young mother whose child was coughing violently in the back seat. She ran a light trying to get to a clinic. I knew that. I heard the boy coughing. Still, when she pleaded, I leaned down and offered my way, the way that emptied her wallet. The moment she handed me the last of her cash, her hand visibly shaking, she whispered, "My son is sick, and you still want to take from me?" Her words were a knife I refused to feel. I pocketed the money anyway. Later that afternoon, a black sedan rolled through my checkpoint. Tinted windows, expensive watch on the driver's wrist, confident smile. The type of guy who didn't fear consequences because he could buy his way out. Before I said a word, he held out cash, a thick wad of it, like it was just protocol. For a moment, time slowed. My hand hovered in the air, strangely heavy. A thought whispered into my chest, louder than everything else around me. Allah is watching you. I had heard that phrase my whole life, but on that day, it wasn't just a phrase. It felt like a warning, a presence. Yet even then, I still took the money. My corruption didn't crumble in that moment, but it trembled just enough to scare me. On my way home, as the sun dipped and the sky turned the color of embers, the evening adhan drifted from the mosque again. This time, I slowed, just slightly. My fingers tightened on the handlebars. For a split second, I imagined parking, walking in, bowing down, admitting everything. But pride is a thick chain. I drove past, again. That evening, my house was filled with the laughter of my kids. My daughter ran into my arms. My son peeked from behind the doorway. My wife asked how my day was. "Good," I said. The lie rolled off my tongue effortlessly, but deep inside, something was unraveling. As we ate dinner, simple food, warm and familiar, I watched my family with a strange ache pulling at my heart. A whisper rose again. If Allah wanted, He could take all of this from you in a moment. I forced myself to brush it off, retreating into my phone, planning what I'd spend my dirty money on next. A new phone, a bigger TV. Things we call blessings, but are sometimes traps disguised as comfort. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, replaying the day, the old man's desperate eyes, the mother's tears, the confident, corrupt driver who reflected the very person I had become. Every image weighed on my chest like a stone. I told myself to stop, to slow down, to return to the faith of my youth, even to pray again. But then came the familiar voice of my ego. "Relax. You're not doing anything serious. Everybody does it. You're just taking what you deserve." And, like a fool, I chose that voice. As dawn approached, I drifted into a restless sleep. The Fajr Adhan rose softly from the mosque a few streets away, and for the first time in a long time, I woke to its sound. The words washed over me in the dim pre-sunrise light. Hayya ala salah. Hayya ala el falah. Come to prayer. Come to success. I heard the call, felt it tug at me, but I stayed in bed, telling myself I'd get up in a minute. I never did. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that in just a few hours, everything in my life was about to change. My illusions of control, my steady flow of cash, my pride, my uniform, my certainty, all of it was about to be ripped away. The day Allah took everything from me didn't start with chaos. It started with the choices I had been making all along, and when it finally arrived, it hit me in a way I never saw coming. The morning it happened felt ordinary. That's the cruel thing about life. Sometimes disaster arrives disguised as routine. I woke up to the smell of coffee, my kids arguing softly over a cereal box, my wife humming in the kitchen. My uniform hung neatly from a chair, freshly pressed. I remember running my hand down the fabric, feeling proud of something I didn't deserve to feel proud of. My wife smiled at me, kissed my cheek, and told me to be safe. She said the words with so much trust that it almost hurt, but I swallowed the guilt and walked out the door, pretending everything was fine. Work started like usual. Heat shimmering over the pavement, engines humming, drivers hurrying past like life always moved too fast for them to keep up. I slipped back into my routine, predatory, confident, blind. I pulled over a man in a pickup truck, not because he did anything wrong, but because I recognized him as someone who'd pay to avoid hassle. He resisted at first, which irritated me, and when he finally gave in and slid a folded bill into my hand, I felt that old rush. I thought it was power. I didn't know it was poison. What I didn't see was the man in the car across the street, holding his phone at just the right angle, recording everything, my hand closing over the money, my voice telling the driver we could handle things quickly, my face calm, practiced, guilty. One moment was all it took. One moment that would follow me home like a shadow I couldn't outrun. By evening, whispers were moving through the station. People avoided eye contact. A supervisor called me in, with a tone too smooth to trust. He asked me to sit down for a minute. They never say what's really happening. They don't have to. They just press play. And there I was on the screen, taking money as naturally as breathing. It's terrifying, seeing yourself from the outside. Not the way you tell your story, not the version you justify and defend, but the truth, the raw truth. I looked like a man with a hollow soul, wearing a badge he didn't deserve. Internal affairs didn't waste time. They questioned me calmly, professionally, almost gently, which made it worse. Every answer I tried to form dissolved before it left my mouth. I didn't bother denying it. How could I? The video was clear, too clear. My career, built on lies and excuses, snapped clean in half. I watched them take my badge from the desk, slide it into an envelope, and place it aside as if it were evidence from a crime scene. In a way, it was. Walking out of the station that day without my uniform felt like stepping into daylight without skin. The sun was bright, but everything inside me felt cold. All the years I'd spent convincing myself I was still a good man deep down suddenly felt like a joke, a cruel one. And the punchline hadn't even arrived yet. The real blow came when I got home. My wife met me at the door. She didn't speak at first. She didn't need to. She saw everything on my face: shame, fear, collapse. When I explained, her hand went to her mouth. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. And in that moment, I realized I had been one for a long time. My children peered from behind her, confused by the tension in the air. That was the first moment I wished I could erase myself from the world rather than see the hurt in their eyes. But humiliation wasn't done with me yet. The department launched a deeper investigation. Old complaints resurfaced. People who feared me before were bold now, ready to speak. Drivers I'd pressured. Workers I'd taken money from. Stories I thought were long buried suddenly rose like bodies floating to the surface. And then one morning, officers, men I used to call brothers, stood at my door. They didn't smirk. They didn't pity me. They just followed procedure. They read my rights. They put cold metal handcuffs around my wrists. My wife cried behind me. My kids screamed my name as they pulled me away. Jail. Jail was another world. A concrete box with a metal bed, a toilet in the corner, and silence that wrapped around you until it squeezed. I sat there staring at the wall, feeling the weight of every mistake, every lie, every bribe. The uniform was gone. The badge was gone. the false pride was gone. All that remained was the real me, the part I had avoided for years. There's a strange clarity that comes when everything is stripped away. No noise, no ego, no distractions. Just you and the wreckage you created. In that small, cold cell, a thought settled on me with a heaviness that made my chest ache. Allah took this from you because you refused to let it go. I had clung to corruption like a lifeline. I worshipped the illusion of power more than God, more than family, more than integrity. And so, piece by piece, Allah ripped it out of my hands, not out of cruelty, but out of mercy I was too blind to see. Losing my badge wasn't the tragedy I thought it was. It was the beginning of something I didn't understand yet, something painful and necessary, something that would eventually lead me to the truth I had avoided my entire life. In that silence, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't felt since childhood, an ache to return, a subtle longing, a quiet whisper of the heart. But at that moment, I didn't know how. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know if I deserved to start. I only knew one thing. My life was no longer in my hands. And what came next? The thing that happened inside that jail was the moment everything changed. My first nights inside were the hardest. I slept lightly, waking to distant arguments, metal clanging, and the uneasy quiet that only exists in places built for broken men. I kept replaying my mistakes, every bribe, every lie, every time I chose greed over compassion. It gnawed at me, kept me awake until the early hours when exhaustion finally pulled me under. The jail assigned me a cellmate on the fourth day, a tall, calm-looking man with warm brown skin, a trimmed beard, and eyes that carried a strange steadiness, like he had already walked through storms I couldn't imagine. He introduced himself simply as Sami. He looked at me, nodded once, and said, "Tough week?" in a voice that held no judgment, only understanding. I didn't want to talk, but silence can be suffocating. Eventually, as days passed, we spoke in small doses. He never forced conversation, never pushed, but little by little, I learned he was serving time for something he regretted deeply. Not corruption, not violence, but a mistake he took full responsibility for. What struck me most was how peaceful he seemed. Even in a cell that smelled of disinfectant and old sweat, even surrounded by anger, despair, addiction, he carried a kind of inner light I couldn't explain. One night, when sleep refused to come, I noticed him sitting on the floor, facing the wall, whispering something softly. His hands were raised, palms open. His eyes were shut. His entire posture radiated serenity. When he finished, he looked at me and said, "Just making dua." I didn't know what that meant. I shook my head. "What's dua?" He smiled slightly. "It's prayer. A conversation with God." I scoffed, not out of disrespect, but because it felt foreign to me. "You think God listens to people in a place like this?" Sami didn't get offended. He just looked at me gently, like he had been asked that question before. "Brother, God listens to people, especially in places like this." His answer hit me harder than I expected, especially in places like this. For the first time, I felt a tiny crack in the wall I had built around my heart. A few days later, he handed me a small book. It was worn, edges frayed, pages slightly yellowed. "If you ever feel like reading," he said. This helped me when I felt lost. It wasn't the full Quran, just a simple introduction, with explanations about Islam for beginners. I didn't open it right away. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I didn't want to admit I needed help. But one night, when the walls felt too tight and my chest felt too heavy. I opened it. The first thing I read wasn't a command or threat. It wasn't something that made me feel small or unworthy. It was gentle. It talked about mercy, about forgiveness, about a God who knows the hearts of his servants. There was a line that said, "Allah is closer to you than your jugular vein." I didn't understand everything, but those words, they cut through me. Closer than your jugular vein, closer than breath, closer than regret. I closed the book and sat there in the dim yellow light, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, I whispered, "God, if you can hear me, I need help." Over the next weeks, I watched Sammy pray. 5 times a day, like clockwork, he washed his hands, his face, his arms, slowly, respectfully, and then stood in quiet devotion. There was nothing dramatic about it. No theatrics, no shouting, just tenderness, sincerity. One day, after he prayed, he said, "You know, Jack, Islam isn't about being perfect. None of us are. It's about turning back to God after being lost. Lost." That word felt like it belonged to me. He continued, "Allah forgives all sins when a person sincerely repents, all, no matter how heavy." I swallowed hard. "Even someone like me?" He nodded. "Even you, even me, even anyone who turns back with a sincere heart." I don't know why, but I believed him. Not because he said it with authority, but because he said it with peace. One night, a storm hit outside. Thunder shaking the windows, lightning cutting through the darkness. I couldn't sleep. My chest felt tight again. But this time, instead of reaching for excuses or anger, I reached for the little book Sammy gave me. I opened it randomly and found a passage about Hidayah guidance. It said that Hidayah doesn't always come in bright moments. Sometimes it comes in hardship. Sometimes it comes when everything you rely on is taken away, so you finally turn to the one who never leaves. I sat there shaking, not from the cold, but from something deeper. A realization that maybe, just maybe, the worst thing that happened to me was also the best thing that could have happened. My career collapsing, my lies exposed, my freedom stripped, my pride shattered. What if all of that wasn't destruction? What if it was mercy in disguise? The next morning, I asked Sammy a question I never imagined myself asking. How does someone become Muslim? He looked at me with a softness I will never forget. It starts with belief in your heart. Then you say the Shahada, the declaration of faith. I hesitated. And after that, you begin again. A new life. A clean heart. A clean heart. I hadn't felt clean in decades. That evening, in a small cell that smelled of rain and concrete, I sat across from Sammy. He guided me gently, step by step. My voice trembled as I repeated the words, not fully understanding their depth, but feeling their weight settle into me like truth finally finding a home. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. The moment I finished, I didn't feel fireworks or drama. I didn't glow. I didn't cry at first. Instead, I felt something far quieter. A stillness I hadn't known since childhood. A weight lifted not because my problems were gone, but because my heart finally had somewhere to rest. Sammy smiled, placed a hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "Welcome home, brother." Brother. No one had called me that with sincerity in a long, long time. That was the night I understood something I'd never known. Hidayah doesn't always come to the righteous. Sometimes it comes to the broken. Sometimes it comes to the ones who fall hardest. And as I sat on that cold metal bed, A new Muslim in a place built for punishment. I felt something grow inside me, something small, something quiet, something sacred, hope. But receiving guidance was only the beginning. Learning how to live it, living with the consequences of who I used to be, facing my family again. That was a different journey altogether. My release day was cold. Not a dramatic winter freeze, just that quiet chill in the air that makes everything feel sharper, more honest. I stepped outside wearing the same clothes I had been arrested in, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Sammy had hugged me before I left. "Your test begins now," he told me. "Hold on to Allah the way you held on to your pride before. But this time, don't let go." I carried those words with me. The world outside didn't pause just because I changed. Bills still had to be paid. People still judged. Some friends avoided me entirely, crossing the street when they saw me. Others looked at me with mixed pity and distrust, like I was a dog that had bitten too many times and couldn't be trusted anymore. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. But the hardest part, the part that nearly broke me, was facing my family. When I walked through the front door, my wife didn't know whether to run to me or turn away. My children stared at me with wide, uncertain eyes. The house felt smaller, quieter, weightier. I stood there, unsure of what to say, but the words came out on their own. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "for everything. I'm not the man who left this house, and I'm trying to be someone better." She didn't answer at first. She just studied me, my posture, my eyes, the cracks in my voice, and in that silence, I prepared myself for rejection. I wouldn't have blamed her, but then she closed the distance and put her arms around me, crying softly into my shoulder. "Then show me, Jack. Show us." I nodded, because that was exactly what I planned to do. Rebuilding wasn't flashy. It was slow, humble, and often painful. I took whatever work I could find: warehouse shifts, part-time handyman jobs, temporary contracts. I wouldn't touch anything dishonest again. No shortcuts, no bribes, no fast money. Every morning before sunrise, I woke to pray Fajr. At first, my movements were clumsy, my recitation broken, my voice shaky. But the more I did it, the more my heart softened. There's something indescribable about standing on a prayer mat in the quiet dawn, forehead against the ground, whispering your regrets and hopes to the one who knows all of them already. It felt like breathing for the first time in years. When I started attending the mosque in my community, shy, nervous, unsure how people would react, something unexpected happened. They welcomed me, not with suspicion or judgment, but with warmth. Men I had never met before shook my hand, smiled, asked about my day. They didn't care about my past. They cared about my intention. They cared that I was trying. The turning point for me came on a Friday afternoon. I was sitting on the masjid carpet, listening to the imam give the khutbah. He spoke about repentance, not the dramatic kind, not the emotional scenes we imagine, but the quiet, consistent turning of the heart toward Allah, step by step, day by day. He said something I'll never forget. Sometimes Allah breaks you to rebuild you into someone stronger, purer, and closer to Him. I felt those words settle deep inside me because that was my life. That was exactly what had happened. I wasn't a perfect Muslim. I wasn't even a knowledgeable one. But I was committed. I learned slowly, stumbling but steady. I read Quran a little every day. I practiced gratitude, something I had never truly understood before prison. I tried to repair relationships, even ones I thought were beyond saving. Some people forgave me, some didn't, and that was okay. I wasn't rebuilding my life for them. I was rebuilding it for Allah and for the family that still stood with me. My wife watched me change, not through words, but through actions, through patience instead of anger, honesty instead of excuses, responsibility instead of running away. Months passed, and one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned gold, I looked at my children playing in the yard. My wife was standing near the doorway, watching them, and I felt it, that quiet, overwhelming sense of peace. Peace I had never found in money. Peace I had never found in power. Peace I had never found in corruption. Peace I had never found even in freedom. It came from surrender, from truth, from Islam. I thought about the version of myself who once prowled the streets with greed in his heart, who believed he was untouchable, who ignored every warning until Allah pulled the ground out from under his feet. I didn't hate that man anymore. I pitied him because he had no idea how lost he was or how close Allah already was to him. And now, as I stand on this side of my journey, all I can do is be grateful. Grateful for the fall that saved me. Grateful for the cell that opened my heart. Grateful for the inmate who guided me. Grateful for the Quran that restored me. Grateful for the faith that rebuilt me. Grateful that Allah didn't give up on me even when I had given up on myself. My name is still Jack Turner, but now I say it with humility, with sincerity, with a heart that beats with something it never knew before Islam, and the peace that comes with it. And this is the end of the beginning of my story. May Allah guide all of us to what is true, forgive our pasts, and strengthen our futures. Ameen.